OpenAI just showed a chip that made Nvidia look slow on DeepSeek, not slightly behind. Not one of those tiny benchmark wins where everyone argues about rounding. On DeepSeek R1, OpenAI says its first custom inference chip delivered about 3.6 times lower end-to-end latency than Nvidia GB300. And on the most interactive token timing, the gap was about 4.1 times. That number is the whole story, because Nvidia is not supposed to lose this fight. Nvidia is a company everyone rents from. Nvidia is a company cloud providers fight over. Nvidia is the company that turned AI hype into the most valuable hardware business on earth. And now OpenAI is standing there saying, actually, for serving language models, we can build our own thing and it can be faster. That does not mean Nvidia is dead. That is the lazy take. The more interesting version is worse. It means the AI industry may be moving from one universal GPU king to a world where the biggest labs build chips for their own workloads. Training still needs monster hardware. Nvidia still owns a huge part of the stack, but inference is where the money leaks every single day. Every chat GPT answer, every coding agent turn, every tool call, every retry, every time an agent reads a file, thinks, breaks something, runs a test, and thinks again, that is inference. So the question is not, did OpenAI kill Nvidia? The question is sharper. Did OpenAI just show the first real crack in Nvidia's AI tax? The chip is called Jalapeno. Yes, really, OpenAI built it with Broadcom. And the important thing is what it is not. It is not a training chip. It is not the machine that trains the next giant frontier model from scratch. It is an inference chip that sounds less glamorous until you remember how AI products actually make money. Training is the huge event. Inference is the monthly bill. Training is the launch. Inference is every user asking every question every hour of every day. If you're OpenAI, that distinction is everything. ChatGPT is not one model run. It is consumer chat, developer APIs, enterprise workflows, coding agents, voice, search, file analysis, background tasks, and whatever comes next. Every one of those turns costs compute. And for the last few years, the default answer to that cost has basically been buy more NVIDIA, rent more NVIDIA, wait for more NVIDIA, hope your allocation arrives before your competitors does. That is an incredible business if you're NVIDIA, but it is a dangerous dependency if you're OpenAI. OpenAI does not just need chips, it needs control over latency, capacity, power, routing, pricing, and the exact shape of model serving. Jalapeno is OpenAI saying the most expensive part of the AI product can no longer be treated like someone else's black box. The DeepSeek result is the cleanest way to understand why this matters. OpenAI says Jalapeno was tested on InferenceX, a public benchmark from SemiAnalysis. The comparison included GPTOSS 120 billion, DeepSeek R1 670B, and Kimi K2.51T. That matters because these are not all OpenAI models. If OpenAI only said our chip runs our own model well, you would shrug. Of course it does. That is the point of custom hardware. The stronger claim is that Jalapeno performed well across model families. On DeepSeek R1, OpenAI lists about 1.7 times higher peak mixed tokens per second per kilowatt than Nvidia GB300. It lists about 3.6 times lower end-to-end latency, 1.65 seconds versus 5.99 seconds, and it lists about 4.1 times lower minimum time between tokens. That last number is the part humans actually feel. It is the difference between an AI assistant that feels immediate and one that feels like it is dragging its feet. For coding agents, it is even nastier. A coding agent does not answer once. It chains steps, plan, read files, edit, run tests, inspect the error, edit again, explain the change. If every step has extra latency, the whole workflow feels broken. One slow answer is annoying. 10 slow steps is a product problem. So when OpenAI says Jalapeno improves interactive inference, it is not talking about a nicer typing animation. It is talking about whether agents feel usable. Hey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this. Now, back to the video. This is why the DeepSeek part is so spicy. DeepSeek became the symbol of cheaper AI. It was the model family that made people ask whether premium AI pricing was fake. It turned the conversation from who has the biggest model into why am I paying this much for the same task? So OpenAI using its own chip to run DeepSeek R1 faster than Nvidia is almost rude. It is the expensive lab borrowing the cheap model's image to prove the expensive hardware story has changed. But there is a trap here. Do not turn this into a cartoon fight. OpenAI versus Nvidia, one winner, one loser, one cracked logo. Infrastructure does not work like that. OpenAI itself says it will keep using Nvidia and other accelerators. It has to. Demand is too large. Training still needs huge general purpose accelerator clusters. Nvidia's software ecosystem is still brutally strong. CUDA is not just a library, it is years of tooling, kernels, habits, docs, engineers, vendor support, and production pain. You do not delete that because a first generation chip got a good chart, but you also do not ignore the chart. Custom inference chips do not need to replace every Nvidia GPU to hurt Nvidia. They only need to take the most predictable, highest volume, most expensive serving workloads. That is the quiet danger. Nvidia can still win training and lose pricing power in inference. Nvidia can still sell a mountain of hardware while its biggest customers gain leverage. Nvidia can still be essential and less untouchable. That is a crack, not collapse, choice. The reason GPUs became the default is simple. They are flexible, they can do training, they can do inference, they can run many model architectures, they have a software stack the whole industry already knows how to suffer through. That flexibility is why Nvidia won the first phase of the AI boom. But flexibility has a cost. If you know exactly what kind of workload you want to serve at huge scale, you can design hardware around that workload. That is the ASIC argument, and ASIC is not trying to be everything. It is trying to be extremely good at a smaller set of jobs. Language model inference has patterns. There is prompt processing, where the system chews through the input. There is decoding, where it generates tokens one by one. There is memory pressure. There is networking. There is the KV cache, which sounds boring until you realize it is part of what lets a model continue a conversation without recomputing everything. There is data movement, and data movement is where speed goes to die. OpenAI's pitch is that Jalapeno was designed around the whole serving system. Chip memory, network, software, rack scale behavior, not just peak math. That is the part people should pay attention to. For years, AI hardware marketing loved giant numbers. More flops, bigger clusters, larger training runs, but inference is not just a beauty contest for peak compute. The model has to respond to actual users. It has to hold context. It has to move state. It has to stay fast while thousands or millions of other requests are happening. That is a systems problem, and systems problems reward whoever controls more of the system. This is where OpenAI's real ambition becomes obvious. OpenAI does not want to be a model company that rents the world from everyone else. It wants to be a full-stack AI company. Models, products, developer platform, agents, serving software, data centers, power strategy, custom chips. That is not a side quest. That is the business model trying to save itself. Because the problem with selling AI is that every successful user costs you money. That is not normal software. In a traditional SaaS app, a user clicking around usually costs almost nothing compared with the subscription fee. The database query costs something, storage costs something, bandwidth costs something, but the margin can be beautiful. AI is different. A heavy user can burn real compute every minute. A coding agent can spend thousands or millions of tokens on one task. A company can automate work that turns into constant inference demand. Growth is not free. Usage is not free. And if your cost per useful result is too high, your product can be beloved and still economically awkward. That is why this chip matters more than a normal benchmark post. If OpenAI can serve more intelligence per watt with lower latency, it does not just get a faster chatbot. It gets room to change prices. It gets room to offer better free tiers. It gets room to make agents less painful. It gets room to survive users actually using the thing they paid for. The AI race is not only about who has the smartest model, it is about who can afford to run the smartest model often enough for normal people to use it. Now, Nvidia is not standing still. That is the part the hype version skips. Nvidia's entire argument is also full stack. It has the GPUs, it has the networking, it has CUDA, it has TensorRT, it has optimized libraries. It has a world where new models get tuned for Nvidia first because everyone is already there. That is a monster advantage. When a new open model ships, the first question is usually, how does it run on Nvidia hardware? The second question is, how much VRAM do I need? The third question is, which dependency broke this time? That gravitational pull is real, so I do not buy the idea that one OpenAI chip suddenly makes Nvidia weak, but I do buy something more specific. Nvidia's worst case is not being replaced everywhere. Nvidia's worst case is being surrounded by customers who learn too much. Google has TPUs, Amazon has Trainium and Inferentia, Microsoft has its own accelerator work, Meta has custom silicon projects, OpenAI now has Jalapeno with measured inference results. Every one of those chips says the same thing. We love your hardware, but we do not want to be helpless. That changes negotiations, that changes roadmaps, that changes where boring workloads get routed, and boring is where the volume is. The sexy demo is one hard prompt. The money is a billion ordinary turns. If custom chips take a chunk of those ordinary turns, Nvidia still wins big, but it stops being the only answer. For developers, the consequence is not that you will buy an OpenAI chip. You probably will not. OpenAI says Jalapeno is for its own compute infrastructure. This is not a GPU you put in a gaming PC. This is not a cloud instance you casually rent tomorrow morning. The consequence is that AI products can start feeling different. Lower latency changes behavior. If an agent responds slowly, you babysit it, you tab away, you lose trust. You stop asking it to do multi-step work because the pauses feel endless. But if the same agent can think, call tools, respond, and recover faster, you give it more work. That is where Jevons paradox hits. When something gets cheaper and faster, people often use more of it, not less. So better inference does not mean the world uses less compute. It probably means AI gets inserted into more places. Your IDE asks a model more often. Your terminal gets a model. Your browser gets agents. Your docs get agents. Your code review gets agents. Your support system gets agents. That is why latency matters. Latency decides whether AI feels like a tool you consciously invoke or a layer that sits inside everything. OpenAI wants the second version, so does every major lab, and custom inference chips are how they make that version less financially insane. This is also a pricing story. When an AI company cuts prices, the money has to come from somewhere. Cheaper models, better routing, lower token usage, higher batch efficiency, better caching, cheaper power, cheaper serving hardware, or the company eats the loss. That last one is fun until the bill arrives. Jalapeno is OpenAI trying to make the sustainable version real. If OpenAI can run agent workloads faster and cheaper, Anthropic, Google, Meta, xAI, DeepSeek, and everyone selling coding tools has to respond. That is good for developers, not because one company is your friend, but because alternatives create pressure. The chip story becomes a product story, and the product story becomes your monthly bill. Now for the catch. These are OpenAI published results. They are measured, specific, and much more serious than a vague marketing claim. But they are still OpenAI presenting OpenAI's chip in OpenAI's framing. The comparison uses power normalization. It uses specific model configurations. It uses specific operating points. It compares against commercial systems selected for the benchmark, and Nvidia's next systems do not freeze in place while OpenAI ramps a first-generation chip. So the right reaction is not blind belief. The right reaction is attention. The numbers are too strong to ignore and too early to treat like the final map of the market. OpenAI says Jalapeno is planned to begin deployment inside its infrastructure by the end of the year. Production qualification still matters. Software maturity still matters. Running one benchmark is not the same as running a giant production fleet under real traffic, real failures, real demand spikes, and real operational pain. That is where Nvidia has years of scars. OpenAI now has to prove it can operate custom silicon at scale. Not just publish a chart that makes the internet shout, but that is what makes this interesting. We are watching a model lab become an infrastructure company in public, and the first numbers are good enough that pretending nothing changed feels lazy. So here's my take. Jalapeno is not the Nvidia killer. It is worse than that. It is proof that Nvidia's biggest customers are growing up. They are no longer just begging for allocation. They are learning the business Nvidia built around them. They are studying the workload. They are building the serving software. They are designing chips. They are signing power deals. They are thinking in data centers, not just model cards. And OpenAI says the next versions are already moving, with Gen 2 deep in development and Gen 3 taking shape. That is what happens when a market becomes too important to rent blindly. OpenAI cannot afford to be only a customer. Google cannot afford it. Amazon cannot afford it. Meta cannot afford it. Microsoft cannot afford it. If AI is going to be inside every workflow, the companies serving it need control over the machines that make it possible. And if they get that control, developers eventually feel it as speed, price, availability, and product design. This is why Jalapeno is one of the most important AI infrastructure stories of the year, not because Nvidia is doomed, not because every benchmark should be worshipped, because it shows the AI stack compressing. The model lab wants the chip wants the data center wants the power supply, the product wants the agent, and the agent wants every delay removed because the user will not wait. That is the game now. The winner is not just a company with the smartest model, it is a company that can turn compute into useful answers with the least waste. For the first time, OpenAI has shown a custom chip with public numbers strong enough to make Nvidia look beatable in one of the most important parts of that game. That is not the end of Nvidia, but it might be the end of everyone assuming Nvidia gets paid for every important AI token forever. And that assumption was worth more than most people realized.